What's going on, guys? So today we're talking about this card, the new Mulcharmy, or however you say this word. For those who actually don't know what this does, shout out to you for not living and breathing. Shout out to you for having a life outside of Yu-Gi-Oh! But it does say you could only activate one other. I already knew this, so I don't have a life outside of Yu-Gi-Oh! You can only activate one other Mulcharmy monster's effect the turn you activate this card, which is very interesting because this will help you draw cards. If you control no cards, quick effect, you could discard this card for the rest of this turn. Apply these effects. Each time your opponent special summons a monsters from the deck or extra deck, immediately draw one card. Once per turn during the end phase, of the number of cards in your hand is more than the number of cards your opponent controls, plus 6. You must randomly shuffle cards from your hand into the deck so your hands equals the number your opponent controls plus 6. So I actually got into a relatively good Twitter thread off of Jesse Cotton's response to this card. No, this is actually a new Maxx, which it's not. No, please. Here's the effect again. And there's a lot of differences that this card has from Maxx, right? And I just wanted to, I wanted to showcase this discussion that I had because my very first response was, I didn't expect this take from you, right? This is my Twitter page, by the way. I'm on my main page looking at it. It's my Twitter page right now, obviously, at Hot Dog Flexer, but I didn't expect this take from you. A nerf Maxx feels really good for the game, right? And so then this person, Cola Machine, respond, and we got into a bit of a back and forth, but it actually wasn't that bad of a back and forth. Here's what they said. Were you around for BO3 Maxx when it was legal? Not an insult, genuine question. I didn't know what that meant. I've never heard anybody refer to anything like, for me, I don't know what that was. For me, I have never referred to, and I've played like dozens of card games. I've never heard anybody call it best of 3. But anyway, I'm not sure what best of 3 is, but I played during BA format, Cosmo, Monarchs, Fusion Sub-Zoo, and I think there are a lot of arguments for the return of Maxx that I think are very valid. And if you apply those to this card, then this is fine. And this opinion never really changed. I think we ended up in a spot where we just agreed to disagree. They kind of just ignore this section here. But best of 3, BO3 is best of 3. It's a standard instruction back then, right? And so adding back then implies that I didn't play back then when I said BA format, Cosmo, Monarch, Fusion Sub, right? Zoo format. Like, I played back when Maxx was around and you drew into things like Ogre and Veiler, but now you can be drawing into your one card combo or hand traps and board breakers, right? I feel it does more harm than good, in my opinion, which that's redundant. It doesn't need to say I feel and in my opinion. Honestly, you don't need to say either of those two things, but certainly both of them are redundant. But anyway, it's semantics. Right, and I agree. I agree that Maxx is oppressive and that it does more harm than good. However, but, actually is the word I used, we're talking about a Maxx, not a nerfed Maxx, right? Which can be stopped by everything that stops Maxx. And that's actually a lie, right? So I've been checking Cola Machine. Let me check myself real quick. That's actually not true. If you reread this card's text, there is a difference. That actually, it's slightly better in one respect than Maxx. I think overall it's a nerfed Maxx, right? Which we'll get into more of that later. But there is a difference. This card can be used under Dimension Fissure, right? Maxx cannot. Maxx does say send this card from your hand to the graveyard, right? This does not say that. So you don't have to have a live graveyard. D-Shifter isn't out to Maxx. It's not to this card, right? I move forward, right? Everything else, you know, your Cypher Gear Gamma, Crosstalk Designator, Call by the Grave, Ash Blossom, and Joyous Springs that stop Maxx also do, in fact, stop this card. The effect itself is not the issue. Not it can be added. That's the whole but dies for removal joke that MTG has. Cards should never be evaluated by what cards trade one-to-one into them. They need to be evaluated based on the impact they will have on the game upon resolution, right? And that's actually a very interesting point that I do agree with, right? However, I don't agree with the first part, but I agree with the sentiment. I don't agree with the idea that cards should not be evaluated by what cards trade one-to-one into them. I don't agree with that, right? Like, let's say there's a card, like, we don't even have to give an example. Take a look at a card like Branded Fusion. If we just looked at what Branded Fusion does for Branded Despia, Branded Chimera, and Branded decks alike, we would say that card is bannable. It's a double Foolish Burial, right? And it's a summon. Foolish Burial is at 1. Why is Branded Fusion, you know what I mean? And obviously Branded Fusion is more specific, but for that archetype, it's effectively a Foolish Burial. A big reason why Branded Fusion is not on the ban list, I think it actually might be in the Master Duel, but it's because Ash Blossom hits it. Is because, and that's it, right? Like Sideframe Delta kind of hits it, right? Like Branded Fusion gets stopped by less things than Maxx Seed gets stopped by, right? I guess you could cross out in the mirror. I don't know, something to that effect. But I think that it's very important that cards are evaluated based on what trades one-to-one into them, right? Take, for example, the At Ignister Link 6 monster versus the Link, I don't know its name, but the Link 4, the Invincible Atlas B-Trooper monster, right? Two very similar cards. Both have a lot of attack. Both are hard to out. However, the At Ignister monster is unaffected by card effects versus Invincible Atlas can't be destroyed. I believe it can't be destroyed or targeted, but it could just be not destroyed by card effects or battle. Beals, right? A card that saw a lot of play back in the day. Doesn't see a lot of play now. Why? Because it's a lot easier to out Beals, right? So I just think that that first part, cards should never be evaluated by what cards trade one-to-one into them. I don't fully agree with that. But I do agree with they need to be evaluated based on the impact they will have on the game upon resolution, right? I just think that both need to happen. We need to look at a card, what happens, what can stop this card, right? Because that's why trap cards have disappeared. It's another example, right? Because trap cards are so slow. That's why you have to have a very, very powerful trap card, or effectively a trap card that activates from hand, right? Or like a floodgate, right? Whereas, yeah, the effect that like a card like Torrential Tribute has on pawn resolution is insane. But the reason it doesn't see a lot of play is because it can be traded, right? And when we look at this card, I do agree with the idea that the +6 is not that much. And I'll go into that a little bit more later, but I do agree the free draws are a problem, right? And a big thing with the other Mulcharmy, or however you say it, that just came out, it was all from hand. So it was a lot more restrictive. This is restrictive, but it is not as restrictive, right? But we move forward. Now, Maxx C has plenty of negatives, but it also has positives as well. And this was another big point to my argument. It makes decks that make a massive turn 1 end boards, it makes decks that make massive turn 1 end boards a lot harder to exist. You must not have had the should Maxx C come back convo with someone from the OCG, where they mostly have no issue. With Maxx C. And that's true. That entire statement that I just made, aside from this part, the first half of it, I should say. But the Maxx C has plenty of negatives, but it has positives as well. And that's true. And I think a lot of people don't see that, right? And I think MCool40 also talked about this card, right? I think yesterday it was. And he was sort of like one of my main driving factors to this Twitter thread, to being on this side of the argument. Listen, I hate Maxx C, but I understand the argument about its existence. Okay? I think the problem is so many decks are designed to be solitaire decks, right? And I use that phrase later in this thread. I don't think that's healthy for the game. And I think that the state of the game, potentially, with the existence of the Mulcharmy cards, because there's probably going to be more, right? And I'll explain why in a little bit. I think it helps a lot. The fact that maybe I shouldn't summon this many times because my field's going to lose to a Nibiru, right? Maybe I shouldn't overextend because I'm going to lose to a Lightning Vortex or Dark Ruler No More, right? Maybe I should save some for follow-up. But I understand that more people would be apt to agree with me if it was like only bad decks could run this card. But actually a lot of good decks can run this card too, which this person actually does get into in a little bit, right? Person gets offended by this line, right, where they say, that is flagrantly untrue. You should refrain from making assumptions about convos I've had with people because it's just speculation from you that doesn't mean anything, right? We're talking about the card. Stop trying to minimize what you think I know, right? And I always stand by this statement. Nothing against Cola Machine, but whoever the first person to get upset in an argument is, they're usually the one wrong. And I understand there's a lot of likes on their posts and not on my post, but I think for the most part, the community doesn't like Maxx and doesn't like this card, right? So that's why there were so many things there. And I did apologize, right? I'm not sure why you're getting defensive. You're just making a lot. You're making a lot of talking points from I hate Maxx with a passion, and a worse version of it is still bad, which is a super TCG thought process. And it's true. If you haven't played Master Duel, if you haven't played in the OCG formats, you hate Maxx. Or maybe you have only played TCG Master Duel, which I think is most people in the TCG. They don't understand that the format warping card that is Maxx, not everybody feels that way about it. And that's why I assumed, and I do apologize later, right? No, I'm literally not. You are once again bringing up stuff that's irrelevant to the topic. I'm actively telling you my opinion on Maxx adjacent effects lie in a design space that is not healthy for the game, and then you keep bringing up other things, right? I'm actively trying to engage a discussion because I want your viewpoint, because I do believe it's an abhorrent card design, right? You don't. And I want your reasons from a different perspective. And then you say, I guess you've never talked about this, right? And I feel like this tweet was kind of admitting, right, that they haven't had this conversation before, right? I could be wrong. Once again, I'm making assumptions, and I do apologize. My apologies. I assumed everyone's had the should Maxx come back convo for however many this is. I think this is 1,000,000 times at this point. So it felt redundant to rehash points about the card, right? That people who think it should come back always say, right? And what do they say, right? Let's talk about that actually for a second. I kind of mentioned it a little bit. Control players really like Maxx because I just talked about it a little bit. Torrential Tribute. That card is a lot worse without Maxx. If I activate this Mulcharmy and it stops you from playing, and I set my Torrential Tribute, during your next turn, you play a card, I activate Torrential Tribute, you lose your board. Because you, during that first turn, weren't able to establish a negate because you didn't want to go into my Mulcharmy. And for some people, that sounds disgusting. That's horrible. I want my turn 1 combo to go crazy. I want my turn 1 combo to go off. I want all of these different things, right? But that's not really the most interactive gameplay. That's not really something that I think should flourish, okay? Yu-Gi-Oh! Is known as this sort of overcomplicated mess of a card game that's impossible to get to know from day one. And that's because you have so many different summoning mechanics. You have so many different weird interactions because it does so many things. And I have multiple videos on this channel talking about how to fix that. And there is a lot of people who argue Maxx is the answer. I don't agree with that, right? I do, however, see what I said at the start, which was a nerfed Maxx is healthy for the game, right? And so then they say, maybe I should get my experiences, so this is a one-sided. I've been playing tournament Yu-Gi-Oh! Since I was 10. My first format was a little bit after Edison. I remember, especially during the Teller BA Shadal format, Maxx was so unbalanced, you'd lose main phase 1. That's actually not true. This format, Maxx was not that big of a problem. This format, like against these 3 decks specifically, during that time, normal summon, Satellar Knight, Deneb, set 4 and pass was usually how a Teller player played. Sometimes you could argue it was like normal summon Satellar Knight Vega, activate effect a special summon, chain Maxx, special summon another card out, draw a card, maybe make an Abyss Dweller, maybe make a Giant Hand, maybe make a Satellar Knight extra deck monster, and pass. Give your opponent 2 cards, right? Burning Abyss was a little tricky because in some cases it was like normal summon Tour Guide, special summon Seer, make Dante, detach the Seer, mill, Seer effect, special, right? All of these different, and start to go crazy from there. Effect in hand to special, right? Make another rank 3, continue from there. But there was also a lot of times where BA players would just like set a Skarm and set 3 and pass. Shadal's, activate Shadal Fusion, chain Maxx, special summon Winda. They draw a card, it's a 1-for-1. So that's actually not, that format wasn't that bad of a problem for Maxx. In my opinion, the format that did Maxx in the TCG, and I'm not sure, but it was Draco Pals. When you could go face off, activate Luster, pop, activate, special summon out, make Ignister, special summon out, make Dynaster, make Titanic Hope, or the number 38 Titanic Galaxy negate spells, direct attacks to itself, that card. Also, Fire King Cosmo was really popular. Fire King Cosmo, you have to special summon like 5 or 6 times to get any type of end board at all, right? And Maxx was everywhere. Maxx was in every deck, right? There was another deck that was really popular right around that time, a little bit before that. It was Monarchs. Especially the extra deck version got hurt by Maxx a lot. But the main lock version of Monarchs, it didn't really get hurt by Maxx that much. And that's the interesting thing, is that there's this aura that Maxx is just this unbalanced, you would lose main phase 1 if it's activated type card. And that's just not true. Like, people who have played Master Duel, people who have played the TCG long enough, like Cola Machine, they know that there are times where a Maxx resolves against you and you still win. And I said, my first format was that specific format, like right after Jin was banned and the game was playable again, right now here. So secondly, the positive that you're talking about is a negative, because all you're doing is replacing a current problem with a new problem. This, wholeheartedly agree with this. It stops Snake Eyes, sure, but what do you do when Tempai, unequivocally the best deck because it buffs them to such an absurd state? Which is true. And I said, it doesn't just hurt Snake Eyes. It hurts every other solitaire deck in the game. Yes, specifically Tempai, maybe Cyber Dragon, Mermail, Numeron. I tried to list going second decks, but if we take a second and think about it, outside of Tempai, right? Because Cyber Dragon, Mermail, Numeron are not meta. Outside of Tempai, what's a super meta going second deck? like blind second. We want to go second. I'm going second, and you can't stop me. What deck is that? Because in my opinion, going second, it's kind of rough. There are cards that play around Dark Ruler no more now, right? Because they can, I mean, there's been a lot of cards like that, but there is a meta card in the Fiendsmith combo that plays around Dark Ruler no more, plays around potentially Forbidden Droplets. What are you supposed to do? Like, what are you supposed to do to a Plant Link board that says you can only activate one spell and you didn't draw Dark Ruler no more? Right? And there's so many other, like, we can all think of solitaire decks, right? Like, we can all think of Sprite, Kashtira to an extent likes to combo a lot. Snake Eyes, Fire King, Melodious, Yubel, any deck that can make a Link 2 now, because the Fiendsmith cards are can be in literally everything, and so many more. Whenever a deck gets new support, it effectively becomes a solitaire deck. Salamangreat is like that. And I don't hate that. I wouldn't play Yu-Gi-Oh! If I didn't like solitaire decks, right? But only solitaire decks I don't think is really good. I will say, though, this card, okay, right now, Tempai is the only issue going second. What happens in the future? Right? Because they said the only way I can see you having this opinion is if you currently play Tempai, or that you play a blind second deck like Numeron on Master Duel and think that Maxi is fine in the grand scheme of it because it helps instead of your hyper niche meta and Golden Plat. And I will say, actually, that assumption is actually a little bit true. I actually really like going second decks. I'm not gonna lie, I actually really do enjoy going second. But you don't really need these cards to go second. They help a lot, though. They do help a lot. I'm not even gonna lie about that. It's just interesting. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has never been a going second format. I don't think this card makes it that. But if it does, that could be really obnoxious, because it's gotten close. When the Atlantean Prince first came out, when the Cyber Dragon Link came out, there were some Cosmo builds that were messing around with it. I kind of want to say Animancipator had that potential of just like going crazy going second. True Draco Zoo had a lot of potential going second. If we're looking at more recently, a lot of the recent decks like Sword Soul, the Adventurer package, the Punk package, Rescue Ace, Sprite, going first. There's Math Mech, right? Math Mech's amazing going second. This card helps Math Mech a lot. But I don't think going second decks, like OTK decks, are bad for the game. And I think that a card that supports it isn't that bad either. But let's continue. I just see the perspective of people who find Maxi to be a necessary evil in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because of the way every deck is constructed. I prefer a Solitaire, Virtual World, Plant Link, etc. type decks that hard lose to this card. However, a nerfed Maxi feels perfect for the game right now, right? And that's true too. I like blind second. I like going first decks. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? But it's not exactly nerfed is what I'm saying. Sure, it has restrictions, but let's say you drop this on your opponent as they're about to summon from your deck. You have minimum replace the card in your hand, as Maxi does. You have to choose to stop player giving more cards, as Maxi does, right? And I said how quote-unquote nerfed it is definitely up for debate. And I could be overstating how nerfed it is. That's true. And that we don't know how this card's going to be played, right? We don't know if this card's going to be broken. We don't know if a weekend we're like, oh yeah, this card was a huge mistake, right? I just find someone with a full board dropping Max C to be the most demoralizing thing in existence. Also, while it is possible to stay under the 6+ restriction very easily, activate Nib, activate Imperm, activate Veiler, activate Ogre, all these different things, that restriction does exist, right? And when we really look at this card, there's actually another restriction on this card. It just says deck or extra deck. So it doesn't say grave, it doesn't say banish, it doesn't say hand. You gotta work for me. You gotta work with me here a little bit. Obviously, if you have both Mulcharmys going at the same time, right, that can be a problem, and I understand that. But this card is still nerfed. Like, you still have to see both of them. And like, yeah, if you open 2 really good hand traps in this format, you're gonna do pretty well, right? Because there was another person who commented on Jesse's original post that said, like, there are some, I can't find it, but there are some decks, or like, this is an auto win, right? And I'm like, it's not. If you're playing against Lab and I activate this during the draw phase, Lab's just gonna set 3 and pass. Or if you draw it against Lab and you hold it for for your turn, as soon as you control a card, they're just gonna go crazy. Because that's another thing too. You have to control no cards. And so Maxx is actually a great top deck in Master Duel. I top deck Maxx. My opponent is playing Unchained. They normal summon Tour Guide, chain Maxx. I might have just actually saved myself from losing, right? Now in a top deck situation, you can still activate this card. But the point that I'm trying to make comes down to this. A nerf version of Maxx, I think, is a positive for the game. And that's why I like this card, right? However, I understand both sides of the argument. So that's where I'm just actually going to pass it back to you guys. What do you guys think? Do you think this card is a positive for the game or a negative for a game? Let me know in those comments down below. I've been meaning to do a video talking about the return of Maxx, and shout out to Konami for dropping this card, because now I can just talk about it. I can just talk about all of the talking points in this respect. So make sure you guys let me know by leaving a comment down below. Make sure you guys click that like button, show your support for the channel, subscribe if you want more content. Most importantly of all, have a good day.